Hello everyone, Tuni here from Potential Sonogy. I have decided to sew my first pair of jeans. And because it was a big milestone for me, I thought it would be a good idea to document the process. I hope this video will inspire some of you out there who might be reluctant to make your first pair of jeans. And please know that if I can do it, so can you. In this video, I'm going to talk about the preparation leading up to the sewing stage and also things that I adjusted in the pattern. I'll tell you which pattern I used. And finally, my reflections on the sewing process. Let's get into it. After a lot of consideration, I decided to choose the Buttress jeans pattern from Allie Olson. I like the unique look of the front pockets. They are hidden slit pockets. I also think the instructions are very well written and the illustrations are super clear, especially the zipper fly installation, which is the part that I dread the most when making pants. I did encounter one quite significant issue with one of the pattern pieces. I'm not sure what happened. I did reach out to the pattern maker, but I have not heard back. I believe she's on vacation. Having said that, I really enjoyed sewing the Buttress jeans. You can find out more about the pattern in the description. This section contains mostly rambling, so please feel free to skip, but I want to share my preparation leading up to the sewing process. And I filmed myself cutting out the pattern pieces for the jeans, so I'm using it as my B-roll footage. Let's start with fabric. I used 10-ounce denim that I bought online, and I like the weight of this fabric. My machines, I used 2 machines for this project, were able to handle the fabric okay. I didn't break a needle or anything, but I did get some loopy threads when I sewed over really thick seams. Most jeans patterns require 10 to 13 ounce denim. I wouldn't go over 10 for my first pair of jeans, just because when you get to the thick seams, it can be a little challenging if you're using a domestic machine. I like 10 ounce because it's not too stiff, it's not too difficult for my machines to sew. At the same time, it's enough to provide that structured look that we like for jeans. And I pre-washed my fabric to pre-shrink it because as far as I know, denim shrinks a lot. So make sure that you pre-wash your denim before you cut out the pattern pieces. Next, I want to talk about equipment and tools. Are they the same thing? I want to talk about my sewing machines. So I used 2 sewing machines for this project. I set up one machine for construction seams, so just regular polyester thread, and a 116 needle. And the other one I set up for top stitching with gold thread, with like top stitching thread, so thicker thread in the top, and then just regular thread in the bobbin. And I used a 110 18 needle for that one. And I'm not saying that you need 2 sewing machines to sew jeans. It's just with sewing jeans, you kind of go back and forth between construction seams and top stitching. You can't wait to top stitch everything at the end. So it's convenient to have 2 sewing machines for this purpose. And for the zipper, I bought a metal zipper from Wawak. My zipper is really strong. I was unable to trim it, and I'll tell you more when we get to it, but yeah, it's a good zipper. And do not use a nylon zipper because it's not strong enough for jeans, so please use a metal zipper. The other thing that you might want to look into when sewing jeans is to get yourself a button for jeans. At the end of the project, I ended up choosing snaps over a button, and I'll tell you why when we get to it. The next topic is pattern adjustments. So if you're sewing jeans, chances are you have sewn a few garments before. and you've probably adjusted some patterns before. For the Buttress jeans, I chose size 8, and the only adjustment I did before sewing was I shortened the length by 4 inches because I am 5'3", 5'4", and most pant patterns are drafted for people who are a few inches taller than me. The last thing I want to talk about in this section is resources and tips that I learned from my research. Of course, I watched a lot of YouTube videos on sewing jeans and sewing with denim, so those are super helpful. I also learned a lot about denim and how to sew with denim, how to wash denim, how to care for denim from a Love to Sew podcast episode on denim. I'll link to that in the description. And the other resource that I found super helpful is an ebook by Do It Better Yourself. The ebook talks about common fitting issues with pants or jeans and how you could fix them in the pattern. So that's really awesome. Links to these amazing resources are in the description. And that brings me to a little tangent that I want to share is that everybody recommends that when you make your first pair of jeans, you should make a muslin. I mean, it's good practice for every garment you make, but especially jeans, because jeans tend to fit very snug around your body. So you want to make a muslin to make sure that by the time you cut into your more expensive denim, you will have made the adjustments needed so that the final garment fits you perfectly. As much as I don't like making a muslin, I felt that it was necessary for me to make a muslin for my first pair of jeans. However, I found that this denim was the only fabric with the right weight that was the cheapest option that I had in my sewing room. So I decided to just use this denim as my hopefully wearable muslin. So that was my muslin tangent. Now we're going to move on to the sewing part, which is the fun part. I planned this out very meticulously, not really, but I planned this out so that I would have a couple of days to sew this pair of jeans. Day 1, I sewed the pockets and the yokes. Then day 2, I tackled the zipper fly and just sewed the front and the back together. And day 3 was the final assembly with the waistband, hemming, and the closure. I hope you learned a lot from my experience. Here we go. All right, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I adjusted or want to note for myself and for you. First of all, this is the back of the jeans. I'm very happy with how it turned out. My pockets look really nice. I also added rivets at the top of the pockets to strengthen those areas. Here's one of my front pieces, and here's the pocket. I believe this is the right pocket. When I sewed my pocket pieces together, I put the leg side up. So when I was at my sewing machine, I put the leg side up and then I just pushed it out of the way so I can sew the pocket pieces together. I also used my zipper foot to sew this part because I wanted to get as close to the size of the pocket opening as possible. That's where I'm pointing there. My regular zigzag foot was not able to sew that close to the opening, but the zipper foot could, so that's something that you could try. The next thing that I would like to point out is that when sewing the front yoke to the pant leg, to make sure I didn't sew over the pocket opening, I pulled the pant a little bit and then I pinned it in place. Last thing that I want to mention is that I also went ahead and pre-pressed my hems. I find that it helps to pre-press the hems before sewing the legs together, so that's why I did that. I'm showing you the front pieces, but I also pressed the hems on the back legs as well. Overall, day 1 went very well. I learned a few things and I really enjoyed the process. Off to day 2. First, I would like to talk about step 27 in the pattern instructions. This is during the installation of the zipper fly. One thing that I found helpful for top stitching the zipper fly facing on the left pant leg is to open the zipper all the way first and then fold the zipper shield behind the right pant leg so it is out of the way. Then start sewing from the top. Once you get to where the curve begins, unfold the fly shield back out, zip up the fly, and then continue with your top stitching until you get to the center front. So at this point, you're going to be sewing the zipper fly shield as well as the zipper fly facing and the left pant leg. Next thing I would like to talk about is bar tacking. I don't always get nice looking bar tacks, especially when sewing on thicker fabrics like denim. My suggestion for bar tacks, especially for the center front, which go through quite a few layers, is to use a slightly wider and longer zigzag stitch. Also, it is always a good idea to test first. Let's look at my front pockets now. Like I told you, sometimes I struggle with bar tacks, and oh boy, how I struggle to bar tack the corners of these pockets. After a few failed attempts to sew bar tacks on the pockets, I gave up and decided to secure the corners with rivets instead. Do you see the tear where that rivet is? I was super bummed about this mistake. I think I punched the holes too big. I try to be positive about it. These pockets sit very snug next to my body, so I don't think they're going to be especially functional most of the time anyway. Still, they looked so nice before I put the rivets in, and now they're torn and I'm sad. But that's okay, I'll move on. Next time, I'll definitely stick with the bar tacks. Finally, I would like to point out that I changed the seam allowance of the side seams from 5/8 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch. I first sewed the side seams together with a 5/8 seam allowance, 5/8 of an inch, seam allowance, and then I tried on the jeans and realized that there just wasn't enough room around me for my comfort. I know that some people like their jeans to be super snug, but not me. And I also know that jeans stretch as you wear them throughout the day, but I wanted them to be comfortable from the moment I put them on. As a result, I adjusted the seam allowance on the side seam, so I sewed a new line of seam allowance to give myself more room. So instead of 5/8 of an inch, I used 3/8 of an inch, and then I unpicked the 5/8 of an inch seams. This means that when I go ahead and sew my waistband on day 3, I will also need to adjust the seam allowance on my waistband pieces as well. That's it for day 2. Thank you for watching, and I'm so sorry about the bad video quality. Ta-da! The final day of my jean sewing journey for the Buttress jeans. So let's talk about it. It's been a long day. So I started at step 32, and first of all, there are a few adjustments that I made today. First, I trimmed the zipper tape before I started sewing. So if you have not sewn with a metal zipper before, apparently there's a way for you to shorten the zipper using a plier, or I don't know what it's called, but I tried that and my zipper is very strong. This is from Wawak, and this is supposed to be a jeans zipper. Yeah, it's really nice, but it's very strong, so it was almost impossible. Well, it was impossible for me to trim it. So I tried, and I'm not a very strong person, so yeah, I was unable to trim it. So I just used scissors, old scissors, not my fancy fabric scissors. They're not fancy, but yeah, I just used my old scissors, and I just cut, and I just marked every time I had to sew over these 2 seams that, you know, I would need to pay attention not to sew into the zipper so I would break a needle, and that worked out fine. Didn't break a needle. Yeah, so it's possible, just be careful. And I used, my stitch length was like 3.2 or something like that, and it worked just fine. I just had to hand crank my machine. That was it. So that was the first thing I did before I put the waistband on the pants. Another thing that I did was, this is one of my discarded waistband pieces, and I'll tell you what happened in a moment. And I went ahead and pre-press the seam where the opposite side of the notches. So there are notches here, notches at the bottom. Where are the notches? Yeah, and at the top, I just went ahead and pre-pressed, because that's how we assemble the waistband, and we're gonna sew it together at the end, and that really helped with the final assembly part. So you can do that as well if you think it will be useful for you. And when I press a seam, especially a small seam, and this one's not small, but when I press a seam, I usually just go to my sewing machine and baste the seam allowance that I would have to press, and then when I go to my iron, I just press it down. It just helps. And then at the end, I just take out the basting stitches. I discovered really early on today that the waistband that I cut out did not match the circumference of the pants. The waistband was way too short. So this is the waistband that I cut out. This is the original one that I cut out, and I looked at the pattern piece. I used the same size. I'm not sure what happened, but let's see. If I, how do I match it up? Let's see, if I were to match it up like that, you can see that it's a little bit smaller. And when I actually pin it, it's like 2 inches, almost 2 inches smaller. I emailed the pattern maker, Allie. I haven't heard back from her. I think she's on vacation right now. Anyway, but I found a quick fix, because this is just a rectangle. What I did was I just used a tape measure and measured around the circumference of the waistband, and then I just cut 2 new strips that are the length that I wanted, including the seam allowance. Okay, and it worked out just fine. Okay, we're gonna throw this away. All right, so the waistband issue was resolved. Sewing the waistband was pretty straightforward. I've never used this method before. So usually, well, not usually, from my experience, the waistband is like finished on the bottom, right? You either do stitch in a ditch or you like top stitch somehow. But this one, you actually finish at the top. I'm gonna see if you can see. You see the seams at the top? So basically, I hope you can see that. But you finish at the top. That's why this is the seam that you press, 5/8 of an inch. At the end, you will finish up here. It's like top stitching at the end. And at first, I wasn't quite sure about this method, and I was gonna go with the method that I was used to, but I decided to give this a try, and I'm really glad I did, because it looks so good. And I really love not having to stitch in a ditch, because I'm not very good at it, and I always hand base, because I want to be able to, I want to make sure that I catch the underside of the waistband, and it's just stressful. And to think of hand stitching this thick seam, that would have been a nightmare. So I'm really glad that they went with this method, and it looks so nice and just flat. Yeah. So thank you, Allie, for introducing me to a new method of finishing a waistband. It's really clean, and it's a lot easier in my opinion. So no issue with the waistband assembly after I figured out the new size of the waistband. Everything went great. So the last thing that I want to mention is the closures. So you can see that I'm not using buttons. I'm using snaps. This was challenging, okay? So at first, I sewed a buttonhole on here, and of course my machine just could not go through. I used the buttonhole foot, and that thing is not very good at going over an even seam, and you have this thick area with multiple layers, and also this area down here, there are like 4 layers of denim in here. Then I tried different methods to sew the buttonhole on, and eventually I just gave up. So I decided to just use snaps because that's what I use for most pants that I wear anyway. This size fine. This one kept popping out because there's, like I said, there's like multiple layers underneath here. So what I would like to tell myself, and you know, if you're gonna sew this pattern, please go ahead and trim the seam allowance after you assemble the two waistband pieces together. Trim your seam allowance to it's 5/8, right? So trim it to like 3/8 or 1/4. All right, that's it for my reflection for the last day of sewing the Buttress jeans. I'm gonna come back and give my final feedback on the pattern and on my journey. Sewing the Buttress jeans by Allie Olson was a milestone for me. As I worked on this pattern, I couldn't help but think about all the techniques and skills I've acquired through my own sewing journey. Sewing jeans requires a solid foundation in garment construction and problem solving, and this project allowed me to draw upon my existing knowledge and experience with sewing other types of pants and garments in general, which resulted in a final product that looked great and that I felt confident wearing. Of course, no sewing project is perfect, and sewing the Buttress jeans was no exception. But even those little hiccups were valuable learning experiences that helped me grow as a sewist. In fact, they've become some of my most memorable moments in this journey. Finally, I would like to thank all the talented sewists out there who share their expertise online. Without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. Now, to you. If you're hesitant or intimidated by the idea of sewing your own jeans, I would like to encourage you to take the leap. With practice, patience, and persistence, you can achieve amazing results. You never know what hidden talents or skills you might discover along the way. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye!